Um, Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is here. Welcome to this week's edition of Virtual Office Hours. We will be talking about the impact of AI and digitization in manufacturing. Everyone has been talking about AI like it's going to save our industries overnight. But between a boardroom pitch and a factory floor, there is usually a different story. And tonight we're skipping the pitch and getting straight to the factory floor. We are getting into the specifics with people who are really doing it, hence the character of our panel. At this point, I'd like to give everyone a minute to make sure everyone is included in the conversation. So let's give everyone a minute to join the conversation. So again, welcome everyone. The topic will be on AI and digitization and the impact in manufacturing. We will be live across all Kenyan Wall Street platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, uh, YouTube, and Twitter. Welcome everyone. If anyone has questions, they can post them at the comment section of whatever platform they're using, and I'll be able to access them from here and feed them to our panel. So at this point, I'd like the panelists to introduce themselves, an introduction, context, and a fun fact about yourself. Okay, we will start with Peter.
Hello everyone. Nice to
Hello.
join the conversation this evening. So my name is Peter Kamau. So I am an industry business lead for Schneider Electric in East Africa. So I have about a decade worth of experience in East Africa's manufacturing environment. I am a digital and automation enthusiast, and of course, I like to ride the AI hype wave. So yes, happy to join the conversation today. Yeah.
Uh, what about you, Daniel?
Thanks a lot for having me here. So, my name is Daniel Senga. I am EABL's electrical and instruments engineer, and as well as the OT cybersecurity lead. I have been in the manufacturing industry for more than 15 years, mostly in the automation industry, and that has also been my biggest hobby and likeness. I've seen a lot of transformation in terms of automation industry, moving from relays, automation, PLCs, and now to the level where we are getting to understand and collect data. So I'm really looking forward into getting and discussing the subject of the day.
Thank you, thank you. And finally, Moses.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Moses Kemibaro. I'm the founder and CEO of Dotsavvy. Dotsavvy is a digital marketing and transformation agency that has been around now for, believe it or not, something like 23 years. I also happen to be a blogger, a podcaster, a technology analyst, and somebody who basically covers everything technology across Kenya and East Africa. And it's a real pleasure to be here to discuss AI in the context of manufacturing and digitization, which is something that I must say that I've been following and covering for the last 3 years extensively.
Thank you, everyone. At this juncture, I'd like to lay down some housekeeping. We have a very interesting conversation ahead of us, but it's against limited time, so I'd kindly urge the panelists, let's keep the answers to 3 minutes, ensure we cover as many questions as we can. Thank you. We will start with a question to all the panelists. Honestly, is AI in manufacturing as transformative as the headline say, or is it mostly hype? That's a question across the panel. We'll start with Daniel.
Thank you. That's a quite interesting question for sure. And honestly, to me, I think both. Starting with the hype, of course, the hype comes with how long will this AI release or use comes in? How fast is it going to be rolled out? And all that. You see, when there's a new technology, everyone looks forward to it. But in terms of the transformative part of it, it is real for sure. And this comes when you start seeing results in terms of the changes that happenings. If I take an example in the manufacturing industry, where you see opportunities in efficiencies, opportunities in now the data that you're able to analyze and get insights and make decisions in time.
What about you, Moses?
Great. So I think for me, what's interesting when I think about the manufacturing context is one of the things I think is predictive analytics, right? The fact that if you have AI and you're in a manufacturing concept, the amount of sort of telemetry and information coming off that machinery allows us to know, for instance, what condition it's in, what's the potential for failures, how is it performing according to what we expect it to do. And basically, we have intelligence around processes and activities that historically maybe we had no visibility into knowing what's happening. And I think when you think about manufacturing, think about the fact that now we even have what they call dark factories in places like China, factories that run at night that are fully automated with AI. They have sensors that allow us to know how it's going to perform. And in many ways, many of these operations are super efficient, super cost effective, and highly performative. So I think in the manufacturing context, and possibly controversially, AI is going to be massive, especially when you combine it with intelligent robotics. And more importantly, it will allow us to produce more and do it at a much higher level of quality at a significantly lower cost, which is, of course, one of the most important things when it comes to efficient manufacturing.
Oh, thank you, thank you. What does Peter think?
Thank you for that, and interesting sentiments coming from my fellow panelists. For me, AI is definitely everywhere, but the value is not. And I think it's only transformative if then the deployment is anchored on value. And this is largely the conversation that we're having with industry today, or rather that is happening with industry today, because the hype, the technology is available, AI is definitely transformative, but the value and the intent with which it is applied is what brings actual contextual gains to a company or to the manufacturing setup. So for me, AI is not just creating the dashboards, it's about defining the value. And in that is where you move from hype to actual value.
Okay, thank you. So, Peter, Schneider works with manufacturers across Africa. Where are most of them actually starting when it comes to digitization?
So actually, that's actually quite interesting. So Schneider, for the last 100, it's been in existence for the last 190 years, and a very strong adopter to AI and digitization in the manufacturing field, especially driving electrification and the adoption of digital and now AI in the electrification of industries, in the process element, and finally into driving variable outcomes. So for me, across Africa, where are we? And that's a big question. And for me, it's we're in between that space where we are and starting to appreciate what this kind of technology has for us, and then companies are now starting to do sort of have that conversation of how we derive value in it. So for me, it's an issue of the quality of the data that you have is has a direct correlation with the value that you are able to get. So in as much as the hype and the understanding of what value AI can bring, I would say most manufacturing setups are not really have not really gotten to that point where they're able to harness value. So at that point, we're defining what data they have, what they data that what value that data has to them, and how to bring it out to life. So I would say today we're still very early adopters of AI technology.
Okay, thank you. Moses, Dotsavvy is working at the intersection of digital and business strategy. So, how would you convince a traditional manufacturer that this is worth a disruption?
Well, the first thing I always say when you're selling a product or service is, number one, do not sell the unsellable, meaning that the job is not to convince, it's really to understand, number one, what are the business pain points and how does this particular digital transformation, which quite often is really as simple as saying it's not changing what we do, it's changing how we do it by incorporating digital processes to achieve a higher quality outcome, reduce cost, reduce the time to market, and all these factors. And I think, yeah, number one is the attitude or the behavior around it, first of all, has to be that I don't need to convince you. You need to understand whether or not this is going to have a business value. The next question then becomes, where is the impact? Because it's not just about buying a fancy and brand new software or machine that is going to improve the process. Ultimately, it also comes down to people, to the processes, to how you actually deliver value through the products that you're making within this manufacturing process. And that means basically rethinking how this is done from start to finish so that it's optimized for a digital first process, meaning that it means you need to rethink and reimagine how your process and your manufacturing activities work from start to finish within the context of a digitally led or created situation. And then I think probably one of the most critical things is what's the ultimately, like I do often with our clients, where for instance when we do marketing, we often say that we are performance driven marketing. We don't do marketing for the sake of it. We do marketing that is going to generate performance in terms of business results, whether it's improved sales, lower costs, higher quality product, better insights on the marketplace and your customers. And basically that is all underpinned by data. So basically we're saying, don't do it for technology's sake, do it for a specific business outcome that either A is going to improve maybe your top line growth or is going to improve efficiency so that within the bottom line, you're not only reducing costs, but you're retaining a higher portion of the revenues that you're generating. So it has to come back to a business case, right? And I think if a business case is not clearly understood or clearly appreciated, then there's no real point in activating that particular client. I don't need to convince you. I need to have you understanding that this intervention is about improving overall business performance.
Okay, thank you. So EABL is one of East Africa's largest manufacturers. So Daniel, what does AI adoption look like from a company of that scale?
AI adoption is actually, I wouldn't say it's a single project. This is like a journey where you have to start at the right foundation. And when I say the right foundation, it means you have to have the right infrastructure on the ground. You have to have systems that are able to be connected, and you have to have systems that are able to connect and also transform the data that can be analyzed into a usable and give results out of that. So these at different levels and at different technologies and age of equipment matters, and you'll find this is the same picture that you will find in most of the manufacturing industries across Africa. Now, for EABL, we also have different legacies of technologies, both mixed and new. And we have been in a position where we have the legacy where we have to transform the data, and also being in a position where we can also tap directly to what we have. And it's still a journey where we are looking at how do we eventually convert all these data to be useful. Just like Peter said, the essence is how do we eventually extract value out of the current infrastructure, because you cannot say you'll in a one night become AI compliant when you still have legacy equipment around you, and definitely you cannot also not dispose them to plug them, because there is also the business part that you need to consider.
Okay, okay. Peter, for a manufacturer with a limited budget, where should they invest first?
Thank you for that question. And I think that sort of alludes to whether it's software, hardware, or people. And for me, it's clearly the people. Because for any success in AI and digitization, it has to be anchored around value. And that value, as Moses had said, has to be defined with first understanding your own operations well enough to see where you actually have gaps to gain from, or where efficiency can actually be drawn, and then use AI and digital as a tool to extract that value. So for me, you start with the people, and first it's skills, not just skills, but also ownership of the process well enough to be willing to adopt change and to change the process in itself. And once that ownership has sort of been taken in, then you can start defining the foundational connectivity and the data that you require to then augment that change. And finally, and only after that do you then actually move to the deployment of software and actually investing in the AI tech or the digital tech that will give you those outcomes.
Okay.
So for me, you need to balance it out. And for me, the I think the soundbite here would be technology scales value, but people create it. So you have to start with the people first.
Okay, okay. Moses, is there a minimum scale a manufacturer needs to be before AI makes sense for them?
Minimum scale. Yeah, I think this is a question that, when you think about levels of maturity, right? Where is that manufacturer? Are they ahead? Are they behind? And I think there's no real minimum readiness, right? I think that's an entirely different thing. I think scale is about revenue, headcount, things like production volume. When you think about readiness, it's whether your operations are structured to generate the usable data, meaning do you have the sensors, do you have the IoT so that you can actually see what's happening on the production line? And also, is this data in a format and a manner that you can actually use and surface insights from, right? But it's not enough to just have the data. It's also a question of what you can do with it. Then think about the machinery. Does it have the ability to interface and actually work with AI-enabled systems and softwares and so forth? And I think when you think about, say, the context of Kenya and East Africa, really the majority of manufacturers, I would say, probably sit in the medium level, meaning that there are various types of production lines. Do they have clean records? Are they documenting things, whether they're coming from manual sources or using things like IoT? And I think also, the leadership, I think, is critical because they set the tone. They determine, are we ready to go to the next level? Are we ready to use technology like AI to essentially optimize and get the best out of our processes? And I'd say that, obviously, it's probably easier for a smaller manufacturer to start to get the benefits of this easier because, again, it's going to be faster, quicker, cheaper for them to do so. But the larger the organization, the more mature the organization is, which is, again, typical in these situations, they're probably not going to be as agile in transforming those processes. Maybe they've got serious fixed investments in technologies and manufacturing equipment that doesn't have those systems yet. But yeah, fixing the data collection, enhancing the digital literacy of our team, as was mentioned by the previous speaker. And I think really, at the end of the day, it's a combination of the people, the processes, and the technology that ultimately allow you to sort of get that net benefit out of doing so. So it's not really about, the minimum scale. You can be, at different levels of maturity. But it's a question of to what degree and to what extent are you able to then bring those three things to work to actually deliver the value proposition through AI.
Okay, thank you, thank you. For you, Daniel, you sit in cybersecurity. Could you explain why connecting machines to the internet could be a double-edged sword?
That's quite an interesting question because actually that's what I live for every day. One of the biggest advantages of connecting machine to the internet is you actually unlock a lot of value. One of them is you get the advantage of remote monitoring. You are able to understand and also get a predictive insights where you can predict any form of deviance, maybe quality type, maintenance, and you are able to respond in time and also make the right decision in time. However, there's a difference between OT and IT security. The key priority in the OT environment is availability for the equipment. That is, you need to avail the equipment for production. The IT, of course, is the confidentiality on the same thing. However, with respect to that, when you connect more machines to the internet, it means your risk footprints to cybersecurity increases. And that is one of the biggest threat that comes in with interconnection, that is the IoT into manufacturing. And you see that before even getting to the level of physical connections, one of the key aspects and the mitigation plans that have to be put in place are the policies that have to be in place for cybersecurity. Have you the key policy that you have to address? One is on the awareness, cybersecurity awareness among the people. That is the capability among the people. How do they know? How will they know if an equipment has been compromised to respond in time and also raise the incident in time? How will the preventative activities around cybersecurity be? Are the people, the operators, the technical team aware on the preventative? Do we have the right access controls in place? Where we have sensitive equipment, are they access controlled? Do we have different levels of operations to access sensitive information? We also have the visibility of all inventory, assets inventory, the OT, so that if you see any foreign asset online, you are able to respond in time. So you can see you unlock a lot of value in it, but still there is the other part that you also have to find a way of mitigating with the same thing. But generally, you'll find that OT equipment are more or less designed for reliability, just to ensure that they are able to do production in time, and for that.
Okay, okay. On to you, Peter. What does a successful digitization rollout look in the first 90 days?
It's interesting that you've put a time frame to that question. And for me, digitization and AI is not really a destination. Or I think, as one of the earlier speakers had said, it's not a project that you roll out and do a completion certificate and say that now we're digitized, or we are AI savvy, or we've adopted AI. It's a journey. And for me, it's something that gets woven into the long-term strategy of the organization, so that every investment, every thought, every decision that is made in the business, hence structures or pushes the business a step closer towards that global sort of point where we want to get to. And again, as we had said earlier, it all starts with the value that you're defining. Once you define the value that you want from digitization, then you also start to look at what are your closest sort of fruits, what are the lowest hanging fruits that you can get to, and then start making journeys towards investing towards that direction. So for me, value in general in manufacturing sort of sits in three main categories. One, it's in the productivity or operational space, where you can improve the process or improve your operations, create efficiencies, and save. The next will be probably augmenting the service or product that you have. In other words, creating some kind of additional value on the product that you have to earn more. And the third one would be creating new value. And new value means, for instance, in analysis of your waste, you can find a new use for the waste and or generate a new product from that, which gives you a new revenue stream. And I think majority of the conversation that we've actually domiciled it in the operational space. So for me, 90 or rather, let me not say 90 days, let me say early days in adoption of digital or digitization or AI looks like, for me, it would be a company with a clear vision of what the outcome needs to look like, defining value, and then now starting on the initial steps of getting sort of starting to extract that value. So, for instance, once you know what the say analysis of data can do to you, then you start on the journey of connectivity, getting the data, securing the data, and then finally making the data variable. Of course, some of the advantages are also progressive, where you probably increase your efficiency progressively as you automate more, as you add more data, as you add more connectivity into the process. So for me, early adoption of digitization and AI looks like, how it looks like is a company that has a clear definition of the value they want to extract. So most failures in terms of digitization or AI deployment actually not technical. They're usually leadership or strategy challenges. So if you get your strategy right, then you will have a successful outcome.
Okay, okay. With this one, Moses, I'm going to give you some discretionary extra time. So, what does the data journey look like from collecting raw data to actually making better decisions?
So there's several things that go into this process, and this is something I thought about a lot. Number one, it's really a four-stage journey, right? And I think most manufacturers, if you think about how Kenya and East Africa operate, are probably between stage one and two. And I think the first stage is capture, right? Capturing data, knowing actually what is there. And that means having a combination of things like sensors, IoT devices, or maybe even well-defined manual processes of actually capturing the data. Again, remember when it comes to any kind of system or application, you really need um, high quality data that's actually telling you what is happening, what's going on. It needs to be reliable and consistent. The second, I think, is really about connectivity and storage, right? You have the data. How do you connect the dots, so to speak, to understand what the data means? And how do you store it so that you can start building essentially a repository of information which you can then look at across different types of assets you have around you. So whether it's machines, ships, production lines, clocking in, clocking out, all those data points really start to paint a picture from which now you can extract insight. And that's where now you were able to sort of aggregate and use that data to give you visibility, right? So that's really the third stage where you can have a dashboard, you can look at different types of reports. And the idea is, again, you don't want to just put data out for the sake of it. It has to be insight that people can actually understand, especially the non-technical user or the stakeholder who needs to sort of make the right decisions. And this is information that needs to be coming out regularly so you can start to see exactly what's going on. And finally, the fourth stage for me is really around where you can use AI to sort of help you analyze and surface insights from this data that you've aggregated and collected, and now you can sort of start to have visibility, and that visibility then allows us to sort of do the predictive analytics, things like optimization, being able to understand when machine might actually go down, where you can actually cut costs, where you can start to see these inefficiencies that AI now can sort of give you a window into. And again, the data needs to be high quality in the sense that if it's not good data, then you really can't make decisions that are actually going to have impact. The quality of the data ultimately drives the performance or the output of actually applying this to any AI model. So basically, remember that as we said for many many years, when it comes to computer things, garbage in, garbage out. If your data is not good, even if you apply AI on top of it, you're basically building on a foundation that is not reliable. So you want to make sure that the quality of the data is good, so that whatever AI interventions you're putting into this process to surface insights actually allows you then to get through these four stages and get the ultimate benefit of doing so.
Okay, okay. You've spoken of high quality data. What is the metric that you use against data to qualify as quality, high quality, or low quality? Yeah.
I think ultimately it comes down to how you first of all capturing the data. Is it accurate, right? Are you
Yeah.
using electronic means? Is it maybe somebody manually writing something? Is there a risk of data being essentially corrupted or inaccurate as it's captured? Do you have technology there to verify and confirm the quality of that data? And again, you might be also using data that you're benchmarking against things like industry standards, maybe looking at a typical business in that manufacturing sector, what are the thresholds that you need to look at? But the quality of the data, of course, has elements of subjectivity, but it boils down to the methodology and the manner in which you're capturing it. Also, are you measuring the right things that ultimately feed into the final outcome or the optimizations that you're trying to achieve? So, good data ideally should be something that is obviously accurate, something that is clearly measurable, and more importantly, ideally should be something that is unlikely to be tampered with, or have a situation where the quality of the data could be compromised for whatever reason it is. So again, small things like that really ultimately net add to the final outcome in terms of the quality of the data, and that quality of data which ultimately you're relying on to determine what sort of optimizations and things you need to do in your manufacturing process, will ultimately determine the success of the effort that you're putting into this process.
Okay. Okay. Um, Daniel, what would you say
Yeah.
is the biggest cyber threat that manufacturers are not taking seriously enough?
That's a very interesting question for sure. And I'll actually pick one. One of the most assumed aspect of cybersecurity is the insider threat, and also the poor network segmentation. When I start with the insider threat, you'll find that most of the industries in the cybersecurities are very much focused on the external threats in terms of how do we prevent the external from coming in and all that. Case in point will be now when you look at the ransomware aspect that was really highlighted, and also when we have state actors coming in to disrupt networks and also extract data. But now there is the aspect of the insider threat where if your members or the team are not aware enough, they can be part of your weak link in your cybersecurity. If the users of your critical systems do not use the right password, a strong password in terms of the access, that can be one of your weakest points. Or even they even leave the workstations open. It's possible that someone else can just come in and do malicious activity. The aspect of if high security or high sensitive location of data is left uncontrolled, that can be out as another weakest point where data can be lost in that process. Now, when you look at the poor network segmentation, if you have a layout whereby the network is just flat, in the aspect that if an external threat is able to accesses all the equipment or the data locations at all levels at once, then it tells you that that will be your biggest undoing should that happen. What we should look at beyond this is when you look at the guidance from the Purdue model of networking, where you have to segment different levels of network. We have the sensor level of network. We also have the PLC, that is the controller levels of the PLC. And then you have to go to the SCADA levels, which now interconnect the PLCs, that is the controllers, and then the MES. So you have to find how to have a setup whereby you are able to segment all those sections in the event that if one is compromised, you are able to secure the rest by just isolating that section. So you'll find those two aspects actually literally taken lightly. And maybe that could be the initial setup, or when you have legacy systems in your place. But one of the key things when you are doing now the interconnections, that should be one of the strong points that you put in place just to ensure network segmentation is clear, and also cybersecurity awareness among all the users is a priority.
Okay, okay. Um, uh, this one goes to Peter. Uh, what's the most common reason these projects stall or fail?
It's a good one. I think it's a build up to what all the panelists have sort of been building on. So for me, the first and most core reason that they fail is lack of, or rather, improper definition of the value or the outcome. So if you don't know where you're going, you're not ever going to get there. If you do not understand what it takes to get the outcome that you aspire for, then that's a major challenge with regards to how you approach it. It doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, you are doomed to fail. The second one is usually pilot purgatory, and which is an outcrop of the first reason. Without proper definition of value, and proper definition of value is not just an aspirational outcome. It is not just we want to produce more efficiently or cheaper. It's an understanding of the shortfall, the investment, and the outcome. It's a complete balanced equation, and that usually will lead to the adopters who will go ahead without this clear vision into what we refer to commonly as pilot purgatory, where you throw some money into it, you put in an investment, but you do not generate the outcomes that you are looking for, and you end up in that phase where you're actually not able to scale because the advantages that you are looking for from the pilot do not get realized. And the last one is something that is more akin to the history of the kind of systems that we have, which is very divergent systems. And here's where I would really want to speak to manufacturers, because ideally, from our market, from what we see, is that the responsibility of defining value has more or less been left to manufacturer, or rather, equipment manufacturers, not the process owner. In this regards, if I'm a manufacturer, I own the process, but I have different suppliers, different equipment that make up my system or my unit. And let's say I have someone who's supplying power equipment, somebody who's supplying process equipment, somebody who's supplying me a labeler at the end of that line. So those technologies have historically been very divergent, and the manufacturer or the owner of these systems is not taking the responsibility of converging the system development and especially the data together. That means when you go into, say, digitization and deployment of a digital project, it becomes extremely difficult to read and converge the data. That means you're not able to orchestrate the data together, and that becomes an inherent limitation to what you can do with it. And at this point is where when manufacturers start to take lead on this, is where you will go to the independent manufacturers or suppliers and tell them that I want equipment that speaks a certain digital language that I can be able to connect to, that I can be able to get certain data out of. And that process of acquiring the data will not be expensive, or will not be too expensive that it becomes prohibitory. So I see most of, I think the manufacturers that we've worked with, this is the one challenge that they foresee. And that's why I said digitization and AI needs to be woven into the company strategy, long-term strategy, so that every investment, whether it's a small piece of equipment or a maintenance operation or a system upgrade of any of your distinct systems, then starts to point you in that direction that you want to head to, so that it becomes progressively easier to digitize and to extract information from your system, as opposed to making it more siloed and more difficult um, to digitize. So for me, those are the three main reasons why these projects fail.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So, Moses, how long would you say does it realistically take before a manufacturer sees measurable return on investment?
Uh, that's a very interesting question. And I think, when you think about manufacturing and how long it takes to get things done and start getting meaningful data and insights, I think, you shouldn't expect anything to happen in less than a year, right? So I think a minimum of a year before you have enough data to understand how to optimize your processes and how to sort of see the impact of what these the interventions are performing. And I think ultimately, you really need to build that data that gives you essentially a foundation from which you have clear insights that are able to allow you to move forward. So I'd say that, maybe in the short term, 3 months, you start to see things, start to understand things better. Moving closer to 9 months, you start to get even more insights, start to see where the benefits are, you start to see where the pain points are. Understanding where you're getting the waste, unscheduled stoppages, how you can schedule things. And I think, within a year, really, you should then start to have really understood what's really going on and where the optimizations actually happen. And of course, this is one of those things where you start to get a compounding effect, right? So that means, by the first year, you see this. By the second year, you'll now sort of be able to really fine tune the areas and the places where you can get significant ROI around your various activities from this point of view. So anyone who has sex, in my opinion, within 3 to 6 months to see a very immediate and clear return on investment, that would be highly ambitious. So I'd say a minimum of a year, and preferably you're looking sort of as long as 2 years to really start to understand the areas of optimization and where you can really start to make the gains as far as getting the key benefits out of these new approaches using AI and so forth.
Thank you, Moses. Daniel, has EABL had a moment where AI or digitization clearly saved money or prevented the company from a crisis? Would you give us an example?
That's an interesting question. Thanks. Let me just step back first. When you focus on maintenance strategy, there are three types of maintenance that you can invoke just to ensure that production lines are running. One of them is preventative, which is your normal checks, whether you'll check is the oil level okay, are the temperatures once in a while okay, where you measure them manually once in a while or in a scheduled period. You check you can listen to vibrations of the equipment maybe once in a quarter and all that. So that sort of preventative and checking, do we have temperature rises in equipment that are abnormal and all that. So those can be more or less like preventative, where now you take an action and that. And then there's the other one where is the reactive. Now the reactive is a breakdown has already happened, and now you have to get in and do the correction for that. So and that is usually quite costly, because you'll find you lose your line efficiency, you lose your production capacity, a lot can happen. And also the cost of replacements of those components can also be exponential depending on the type of the failure. And then that one will be now the predictive part of it, where you are in a position to utilize data to predict a certain behavior of an equipment. If an example, you have sensors on a gearbox that are able to pick vibrations and give you a certain trend, and they're able to, in the analytics, they're able to tell you this is within the right threshold of vibrations. Should that change, now you are in a position to have time to make decision to purchase spare part that is required. If you are monitoring a motor temperature that runs, and maybe on a certain equipment there is increased loading, where the motor will strain to pull to tackle the additional load, hence leading to heating of the coil. Now that rise in temperature can lead to the failure of that motor. If you are able to capture that in time and correct, if let's say it's a bearing failure that is leading to the loading, then that data will help you in correction. Now, I would say we've had pilot areas, and like one of the speakers, one of the panels said that we need to have useful data that can assist you in interpreting, and especially where you have pinpoints. we've done some pilot predictive setups where we're able to collect data for condition-based monitoring. Now, with that setup, we were able to, it was an area where we were having frequent failure that would, in the normal circumstance, to correct that breakdown would actually take us more than 24 hours. But now with that pilot area that we put predictive, that is the vibration sensors to monitor the gearbox and as well as the bearings around that gearbox and the motor. We were able to see a change in the behavior of that equipment. And with that, we actually managed to plan an outage within the time and also within the production time so that the production is not interrupted, leading to continuous supply of products. And when all the spare parts were available, now we were able to intervene because we knew the timelines that we had to respond because of the information that we had seen earlier on in terms of the change of the data.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Daniel. Now, for the next question, it's a question across the panel for all the panelists. And it somewhat concludes this conversation in a way. So, for someone watching who is a mid-sized manufacturer in Kenya, what's one thing they should do this week? We'll start with Peter, then Daniel, then Moses.
What you should do this week? I think for me, it always starts with information. Yeah. Gathering the right information, and that information is just from digital sources, but also putting yourself in the right environments that that will give you contextual information to the kind of equipment and gains that you want. So equipping yourself with use cases, equipping yourself or socializing yourself around the challenges that you have and the areas that you want to improve. And then, of course, looking for consultant or speaking to subject matter experts that then give you sort of a more informed view or give you a more expanded industry view of the particular challenge that you want to solve. There are two ways here. There is, and I know Moses said the first year is all getting ready, and I 100% agree with that. However, being very strategic, do realize that probably some especially equipment manufacturers have been for years preparing for some of these digital moves. So you have some very low-hanging fruits that you can actually sort of grab onto. So information does allow you to see that. So socializing yourself with the problem and looking for possible solutions. That is what I would say people need to do this week. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Moses?
Yeah, for me, I think whenever I go into any digital engagement, I always, again, reflecting on the previous comment, is you got to start off with an audit. You got to start with understanding where are you today. And that means really looking at what's in front of you. Do you have any data points? Can you see where you're essentially leaking or hurting? And often you want to look at specific processes where it's very obvious at the very onset where you think or can clearly see that there's a problem. So start off with one process, start off with one area, audit that, and trying to understand where exactly are we leaking, where are we potentially losing value as a result of this particular one process. And the idea is that, if you take a reductive approach where you're gradually going through all these different work streams and spaces, you can then start to understand how you can then have the biggest impact across the board, which means, again, if you use like the 80-20 rule, you want to kind of understand, if I can attack these 2, 3, 4 processes, what is the net effect of optimizing or finding those pain points? And, what's the net effect overall if we can actually figure those several ones out? So the audit really, I think, when you think about digital transformation and how you apply to any kind of business process or any kind of business or organization, once we understand where we are, then we can start to figure out what does that intervention look like, and then what is that investment going to be, and then net, what is that optimization going to achieve in the long term in terms of A, potentially increasing our top line growth, or B, potentially reducing our operating costs and other losses that we're seeing in the system, which ultimately can be recaptured in terms of value to our organization. Right? So start off with one area, or a cluster of areas that you can see very clearly have problems, figure out what that audit tells you, and then use those insights to figure out how best to optimize to then get a significant impact at the end of the day.
Thank you, thank you. Finally, Daniel.
Thanks. I think just to add to what the last panelist spoken to, basically, I think the advice I'll just give is just walk to the floor, understand what you have on the floor. Okay, look at the systems that are on the floor that you have on the floor. What is their current capabilities? What is their what are your critical assets? And like you mentioned, also understand which areas are your biggest pinpoints. Where are you losing most from that? And then once you understand all that and you are able to look at what you have, what are your key pinpoints? The next question will be, do you have any visibility of any data from any of those areas? And what is the approach that you need to pick to get to be in a position to have a visibility of the data of your pinpoints? And you'll find that those pinpoints might be your pilot areas and can give you a heads up in terms of the approach, in terms of scaling up your AI. But basically, start with understanding what is on the ground, because it's only by taking a step to understand your critical assets, to understand your pinpoints, you can only make a move. So start from there.
Thank you, Daniel. So we have a question for Daniel from the comment section. Frederick is asking, who is accountable for AI-driven decisions at EABL in the absence of a dedicated standalone AI law in Kenya currently? What informs AI governance framework at EABL?
Thanks. That's a quite interesting question. First, for EABL, we have policies that guide around data confidentiality, which also eventually govern the AI. And of course, AI is about data analytics and all that. So there is the confidentiality part of it that needs to be, which is also governed by the law. All the policies guide the users on the ground, but the overall accountability, of course, is the business lead, who is our MD and also our legal director.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Thank you all the speakers for the information you've given us. At this point, we are some minutes away from the closing of the stream. So I'd like to give this opportunity to all the three panelists. This is now, no, you're not limited by a question. You can give a take or two on the conversation, on the topic that you've not had an opportunity to air. Okay, we will start with
I can see some questions from our audience.
Oh, yeah, there is another question from Carol Munyuhe. Carol asks, how does ML tie into manufacturing? A simple example, perhaps. Who will pick up the question? I guess you.
Yeah, I can try answer that. Of course, I'm sure the other panelists will also chime in. Okay. So, and by this, Carol, I'm imagining ML means machine learning, and I'll tie my question, or rather my answer, to something that one of the earlier panelists had said. Because you've actually asked for an example, and that's, say, predictive maintenance. So for instance, especially when you have a manufacturing process, it becomes one sort of continuous system, and every part of the system affects many other elements of it. So machine learning comes in where you have data from multiple equipments in that process or in that line that is being analyzed together. And now with use of AI, you're actually able to create parallels or areas of commonalities, or say elements that happen together. And using that, you can then actually be able to predict the outcome of certain processes or certain conditions within that process. So, for instance, a rise in temperature in one area might mean there's some overload in another area. An increase in power consumption might just mean that your bearings are not oiled correctly, and now there's more resistance in the system. So, machine learning allows sort of an AI model to learn how that machine operates, then be able to predict when it's in its optimal state and when it's moving away from that optimal state, and then you're able to take action. That would be my answer to that question. Yeah.
So just to add on to what Peter said, in simple terms, machine language is how are you utilizing the existing data to improve the current process? I'll give an example where if let's say you have a boiler and you've been collecting data manually over a period of time, and you've been adjusting the boiler efficiencies manually without referring to that data. So now we're bringing the machine language aspect into it. It's able to look at that data and look at the baseline of fit, looking at all the conditions. And now using that information, it will give you the set point limits which you can actually operate and get the best fit, the best performance of the boiler out of it. So it's more or less looking back and using that data to improve the process.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. We have another question from Barry Ocheno. I suggest Moses take lead. She asks, how do you make a bet on the digitizing and operational targets, especially budget speaking, considering, for example, if it takes a year to realize the benefits for the AI investment, the biggest challenge currently being productivity? How do you strike that balance and sell these to the C-suites?
In my experience, I often believe or have seen that the easiest way to win when you're looking to get senior level buy-in to making some of these investments, which can be quite substantial, you really have to come with a solid business case that shows that if we are going to go this route, in terms of looking at the numbers and the potential payoff, what is the cost benefit analysis of doing so, right? And this means that you need to be able to show in a very clear and coherent way how this particular outcome is going to actually impact the same. Nobody's going to invest in something that doesn't show a complete ROI. And that's why you need to be able to model and sort of predict what are the potential implications of going this route and how this is going to ultimately impact the organization in terms of its business performance. If you're able to do that, and that goes back again to things like measurement, doing your audits, being able to look and say, look, we're currently doing things in this manner. When we've measured it, this is what it looks like. And therefore, if we're going to make these investments, whether it's in processes, whether it's in people, whether it's in the technology and so forth, to achieve the desired improvements, then this is how it's going to be accomplished. And I think it's a kind of thing that, the conversation where you really want to win over people like the CFO, the overall leadership of the business, because anything that ultimately drives performance is something that they want to hear. So don't come there with a hypothetical or fantastic claims without necessarily backing it up with data, and then wonder why it was not taken up. And again, in most of these cases, you really have to make a compelling business case as to why that investment is the right call and what underpins the perspective or the recommendation that you're making to the organization.
And maybe just to add to what Dennis has said, I think in some aspects, when you look at just a full rollout, in some instances, to some level, it might not make a real business case. The approach in some instances might look at when we say that go to the floor and understand what you have and understand your pinpoints. Now, when you focus on those specific pinpoints, and once you're able to get that data and get a solution out of those pinpoints, you'll get that business case very quickly in terms of running it as a pilot. And when you have maybe a couple of pilots where that are actually giving you value from the implementation and they are measurable, it means then in overall, actually the business will gain a lot of value and benefit from the same thing.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to add to that. I think that's a wonderful observation, because I think an incremental approach, as you pointed out, where you can show successes in mini projects or pilot projects, and then you start getting the compounding effect, so that you're not asking for 40 million shillings. You say, fine, pilot one is 1 million shillings, let's do this here. Probably the biggest pain point, you put in a bit more money. And I think the confidence starts to grow when you gradually demonstrate results out of that investment. In fact, over time, those incremental interventions actually finance the bigger ones that come further down the road. So I think that's a fantastic approach, which you do these mini projects, which ultimately become a big project as you start to build momentum.
That's actually quite interesting. I want to add just one other perspective to what my fellow panelists have said. There's something interesting I like to say in a simple sense. Fall in love with your problem, and I think it's what Daniel talks about when he says, just walk on the factory floor, and when you fall in love with your problem, you sort of start to get an understanding of what works to solve it. At times when you do this kind of level of socialization with regards to the process and what works for it, some of the outcomes start becoming almost common sense conclusions. So for instance, if you do your analysis and you say we had 30 days of outage last year, and that outage was because of X breakdown, and if only we had that spare ready, we could have saved 10 days. That has a direct ROI implication. That is, it has a direct money implication that is very clear to especially C-suite management. And if you're able to make those kind of links, then you have a case to support digitization and AI rollout. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all our panelists. At this juncture, I'd like to give all three of you an opportunity to give your closing takes on the conversation on the topic, and then we can call it a day. I'll start with Peter.
Okay, thank you. So for me, I would end it with this statement, that the manufacturers who win in this digitization and AI journey, they don't chase AI headlines. They're very quiet. They build, they create connectivity, they build efficiencies and sustainability, and then they let AI to multiply the advantage. That's how you win.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, Moses.
I think for me, it's very hard to say that there's a singular playbook to all of these situations. These situations are unique and bespoke to each organization. So as you find your way through, I think the goal, or the word I like to use, is iteration. You learn from doing, you learn from trying, you learn from experimenting. And as you keep iterating, you keep refining and improving the processes that ultimately are going to have the big impact. So for me, I'd say the main thing here is that, especially when you think about AI, even in the global sense, many are still learning as they go along, including the biggest companies in the world. But the secret here is to iterate, learn, discover, experiment, fail, try again, so that over time, the net benefits will start to accrue based on your unique situation and the approaches that you discover through your own unique interventions.
Thank you, Moses. What about you, Daniel?
Okay, thanks. I think for me, the key thing is AI is not a project, or is not just a destination. It's actually a journey. And that journey starts by understanding what you have, and also understanding your pinpoints. A pilot project that has been done in Germany cannot be replicated in Nairobi because the conditions are totally different. We might maybe attend so many seminars, conferences and all that, and you might see a lot of solutions being posted there. But the essence is understand what you have and see what can you plug in, and then focused on first sorting your key problems that are on the ground, and then now continuously expanding as you improve your processes. Because the key aspects around manufacturing is reliability of the equipment, and also giving the right product of the right quality at the right time. So that's key when we have to look at that.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to bring the conversation to an end. We thank the panelists for making themselves available. We thank Schneider especially for making this possible, and we thank all our viewers across all platforms. Questions are welcomed even after. Thank you. I'd like to release you all. Have a blessed night.
Good evening,
Thanks
everyone.
a lot. Have a good evening.
Thank you.